It's a 48-year-old argument that once again has nuclear-armed neighbors at daggers drawn, and locals on both sides braced for the worst. India blaming Pakistan for Kashmir's worst terror attack in years, the killing of 26 tourists, with non-Muslims singled out and murdered in front of loved ones. Islamabad denies. Islamabad, which blamed Delhi for the March terror attack on a train in Baluchistan. There too, 26 killed, the matching tolls enough to fuel conspiracy theories. So, what did actually happen? Why now? And how to break the cycle of repeated tensions over Kashmir, a region carved up at independence from Britain in 1947 and whose borders remain disputed to this day. How far could it go this time? India suspending a vital 1960 treaty that manages water use between the two neighbors, a treaty that held through 3 subsequent wars. What's changed since the last spike in tensions in 2019? Of course, there are the Kashmiris themselves. On the Indian side, they lost their partial autonomy 5 years ago. What's changed inside that Muslim-majority region since? What's changed on the Pakistani side since 2019? That is the question. Today, in the France 24 debate, we're looking at that escalation in Kashmir. Joining us from Houston, Texas, Anuradha Bhasin, executive editor of the Kashmir Times. Thank you for being with us.
Me.
From London, Kshitij Bajapi, Senior Research Fellow for South Asia at the Chatham House think tank. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
In a previous life, he was France 24's correspondent in Pakistan. Taha Siddiqui is the founder of the go-to place for Paris news junkies. We're talking about the Dissident Club Cafe. You have a graphic novel that's coming out about your experience coming to France that's soon in English.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Jean-Luc Racine, Research Director at France's National Research Center, the CNRS, Senior Researcher at the Asia Center think tank. Good to see you.
Good evening.
Your reactions on the hashtag F24debate. Yeah, Pakistan bracing for a response. Religious seminaries, also known as madrasas, have been shut for the next 10 days near the border with India. This after Delhi, in turn, closed its airspace, expelled Pakistanis living inside of Indian Kashmir. Emerald Maxwell has more.
The official deadline to leave the country has passed, but Pakistani citizens were still scrambling to the main land border Wednesday.
I'm very sad because of Kashmir. The perpetrators should be punished for it, but we shouldn't be dragged into all of this.
There are no exemptions for families caught up in the order from the Indian government, which came after last week's deadly attack in Kashmir. Some were being deported by police. This Pakistani national, who was on a long-term visa, has been forced to leave India without her Indian husband. She said authorities did not give her any time to recuperate from a cesarean section.
They told me, you were illegal and you have to leave. I just gave birth to my son. He is 14 days old. My stitches were only removed last night. I have come here wearing my slippers. I couldn't even change my shoes.
Visas for Indians in Pakistan have also been revoked as tensions continue to escalate between the two nuclear-armed countries. There's huge domestic pressure on the Indian government to respond to the attack at Pahalgam, Kashmir, because most of the 26 victims were Indian tourists. India blames Pakistan for backing the gunmen who reportedly singled out Hindu men to kill. Hindu-majority India and Muslim-majority Pakistan have fought over Muslim-majority Kashmir since their partition in 1947. Pakistan has denied any connection to the massacre and says it has evidence that India is planning to attack it imminently.
Pakistan has credible intelligence that India intends carrying out military action against Pakistan in the next 24 to 36 hours on the pretext of baseless and concocted allegations of involvement in the Pahalgam incident.
Pakistan warned that it would retaliate against any military action. There was no immediate comment from Indian officials, while world leaders have called for de-escalation.
Anuradha Bhasin, what are your staff telling you on the ground in Kashmir?
Look, as far as the attack happened, uh, it was shocking, and because it was unprecedented in many ways. Tourists have not been attacked in the past like this. There have been a few incidents like the kidnapping and killing of or disappearance of the foreigners in 1995. There have been a couple of grenade attacks in which some tourists or pilgrims were killed. But the way that tourists were singled out, targeted, according to their identity, as the reports reveal, as the survivor accounts tell you, that has been extremely shocking. But apart from that, while it's shocking, it wasn't unexpected. Because in the last 5 years, post 2019, since the Indian government revoked Kashmir's autonomy, reduced it to, from a state to a union territory, and took away the constitutional guarantees and protection of the citizens, there has been a massive suppression of people. And this has been, the situation has been sold out as normalcy. The government has been trying to peddle a narrative constantly that terrorism has been decimated and replaced by tourists. While that is not true, terrorism is still going on at the same level as some recent incidents in the past, last year, have shown. Tourist numbers have gone up, but the government has made it a centerpiece of their normalcy narrative. I think the attack is definitely, what the perpetrators are, is a way to puncture that narrative.
Right, and we've seen that Indian police have issued wanted posters for 3 men suspected of involvement, 2 Pakistanis and an Indian. They say they belong to the Pakistan-based Lashkar-e-Taiba group, a UN-designated terrorist organization with a 2 million rupee bounty for information leading to each man's arrest. Chetij Bajpai, at this point in time, do we know more about why, and do we know more about the timing?
Yeah, I think, first of all, thank you for having me on this program. But I think we do need to look at the broader political and geopolitical context. So I think you have to see the fact, for instance, that in Pakistan, the military, I think, has been on the back foot to a degree, following a string of terrorist attacks that we've seen inside Pakistan in recent months and years. The army, I think, has lost some of its shine and popularity following the arrest and conviction of former Prime Minister Imran Khan and a persecution of his supporters. Just a week or prior to this terrorist attack, we saw a speech by Pakistani Army Chief Asim Munir, in which he referred to Kashmir as Pakistan's jugular vein. And there is a precedent of terrorist attacks occurring during periods when the Pakistani military feels that it's on the back foot. This is what had happened in 1999 when there was an attempt at a rapprochement between New Delhi and Islamabad, referred to as the so-called Lahore bus diplomacy. This was derailed a few months later when both countries went to war in Kargil. So in this context, I think the terrorist attack can be seen as an attempt by Pakistan or Pakistan's military and intelligence establishment to reassert its relevance. And just adding to that, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask Taha Siddiqui about this, because so we're having sort of 2 possibilities. One is local grievances, in what Anuradha was saying, by radicals, and the other more grievances that come from the capital, or strategies that come from the capital.
I mean, this is again like continuing with what our previous speaker was saying. In fact, Pakistan has been sort of using and running a proxy war in the region, which not only in Kashmir but in Afghanistan also we've seen the same thing, where it has tried to Islamize the local insurgencies or the local movements, and in Kashmir they've done the same thing. And I think that's historically, if we see all the wars that Pakistan has fought with India.
But
also,
we haven't seen terror attacks of this magnitude in 5 years.
No, definitely. But I think that also has a lot to do with the fact that, as the popularity of the Pakistan military, again the previous speaker was talking about, has gone down. There might be, and this comes just 1 week after the Pakistan Army chief went on air, went on camera and said that Pakistanis and Hindus cannot live together. It was a very sort of almost borderline hate speech that he made, and he said that that's why there's a two-nation theory, which is actually, after Bangladesh has been disproven. So all of these factors then kind of act as motivators for ground jihadis, for ground which we know definitely have been trained, and with Lashkar-e-Taiba, as you mentioned, in the last 1 week, we've seen rallies happening across Pakistan. I've seen evidence of it, videos of it being shared on social media, where Hafiz Saeed, who is right now under arrest under some other charges, not for Mumbai attacks, which he's been accused of and a mastermind of. His audios were being displayed, and they were saying that, yes, we're going to fight a war with India. And Lashkar-e-Taiba has now morphed into another different entity with a different political wing. So it continues, Pakistan continues to dabble into these proxy wars.
Shani Qasim, is the answer to our questions in Kashmir or in Islamabad?
In fact, it's difficult to say it very clearly because whatever could be the transborder connection, what's interesting to note is that the organization which first claimed the responsibility for the terrorist attack and then disclaimed it 2 or 3 days later, which by itself it's a bit strange. But the history of this group deserve attention because it appeared after the Modi government decided, as you hint at previously, to discard the traditional status of limited autonomy to Kashmir. And one of the points which is attached to this lack of autonomy is that contrarily at what happened for the last decade, since in fact the beginning of the Kashmir question, this time another article of the Constitution has been dropped, which enables non-Kashmiri to settle in Kashmir. And settling in Kashmir means that they can also buy lands. And this is a point which is extremely sensitive for the Kashmiri population because it applies also for some sort of jobs as well. And it's a part of a revendication of what's called the resistance front, to say, well, the government is in fact, the Delhi government is in fact changing the demography of Pakistan, which is an argument which is said and repeated by the Pakistani government as well. So whatever be the real connection with Pakistan or not, because naturally, the Pakistani government has answered the Indian accuser to say, well, prove that there is a connection. And on the other hand, the Pakistani Prime Minister asking for a neutral inquiry, international, I presume, as I see it, very little chance to really happen to know what was really behind. This being said, we have also to note that contrary to the last most serious incident in 2016, and 2019, in both these cases, it was military or police personnel which were targeted. This time it's tourists, as it has happened in the early 20s. During the first decade of the century, there was a series of attacks against tourists coming from outside.
And what does that tell you?
Well, it means also that we want to remain what we are, and people from outside are not really welcome. Except if they are tourists, because tourists is a very important part of the Kashmir economy.
It could have been much more than 26 killed. The family of slain Kashmiri horseman Syed Adil Shah, mourning the only Kashmiri killed in that April 22nd attack. There was sorrow, but also an element of pride, what with the 30-year-old wrestling with one of the gunmen in a bid to save the tourists.
Who knows how many people would have been killed if he hadn't come between them and the gunman. We're very proud that he did this. We feel sad for the people who lost their lives and have left behind their families.
Anuradha Basin, what are staff of your paper, what are inside of Kashmir telling you?
About who the perpetrators are, I think everybody is clueless. It's very difficult to pinpoint. But, going by the past experiences, I don't think local militants have the kind of capacity to carry out such operations on their own, though there may have been some local support at some level, without which militants cannot operate. Now, having said that, we don't really know what has happened in the last 5 years, because under a very suppressive atmosphere, journalism has been almost silenced. Civil society is decimated. So all the kind of voices that can give a counter narrative to what is happening on the ground, we don't have them. So we really don't know, and we cannot fully assess what is happening on the ground. All we have is the official version.
And Anuradha, your newspaper, the Kashmir Times, in a Tuesday editorial, calling for, this was the headline, the war against terror must be targeted. Explain.
Well, because there has been large-scale actions disproportionate to the incident or to the likelihood of the number of people who are involved as perpetrators, as part of the conspiracy in providing logistics and all of that. There are more than 2,000 arrests. Arrests are going on, raids are going on, cordon and search operations across Kashmir. About 9 to 12 houses of alleged militants said to be perpetrators have been blasted. Now, we don't know how much of evidence there is, but the blasting has been done in such a way that even adjoining houses and neighborhoods have been damaged. Besides this, such demolitions have been declared illegal recently by the Supreme Court, because you cannot hold families responsible for the guilt of individuals. So these are the kind of actions that are taking place, which are extremely disproportionate, and they're also disproportionate in view of the government's own claims, recent claims, that militancy has been decimated, the militants are in two-digit figures, and the locals are less than 10.
Chetik Bajpai, picking up on those points, how much of what we're witnessing today is down to what happened 5 years ago and the revoking of that partial autonomy for Kashmir?
Yeah, obviously, I think that is one of the causes of the bad blood in the relationship between New Delhi and Islamabad. But I think, just to perhaps play devil's advocate for a moment, we had seen a degree of normalcy return to the territory over the last 5 years. We saw elections held late last year, which were largely peaceful with a high voter turnout. Investment in tourism had flourished. The sentiment in the Kashmir Valley had shifted. We'd seen demonstrations that had taken place in the valley in recent days, condemning the terrorist attacks, which I think reflects quite a shift in sentiment. And the relations between New Delhi and Islamabad had soured, which were already in poor shape following the terrorist attacks that we saw in 2016 and 2019. But at the same time, I think what we saw was a degree of strategic restraint on both sides. So despite the bad blood in the relationship, a ceasefire along the line of control, which demarcates Indian and Pakistani administered Kashmir, had largely held in place since 2021. There was an incident in 2022 when India accidentally fired a missile which landed in Pakistani territory. This didn't trigger a retaliatory response by Islamabad. And despite more aggressive posturing by New Delhi, it has tried to limit any collateral damage or civilian casualties and any retaliatory strikes that it's taken. So if we contrast that with, say, the conflicts that we see in Ukraine or in Gaza, where there have been considerable civilian casualties.
Yeah, there was the sense in 2019, maybe I'll put it to you, Jean-Luc Racine, first, that India almost telegraphed its response. It hit a militant camp on the Pakistani side of the border, but it was kept quiet. I noticed on French radio the last couple of days, they emphasized the fact that this is an argument between nuclear-armed neighbors and warning us that this could escalate out of control.
Yes, well, I mean, lots of comments have been made about the fact that India and Pakistan are nuclear-armed countries. But of course, we must infer that for both of them, nuclear force means deterrence, and particularly for Pakistan, which is the deterrence from the weak to the strong, if we see the asymmetry of the two countries. But beyond that, effectively, during the last Indian strike, they were deliberately limited. I don't enter the debate.
Because what have we had this week? We've had a few drones knocked out. We've had some shooting, but no casualties that we know.
Shooting on the line of control is something very common. Basically, you know, it's not terribly important, the shooting. It's very limited.
But we do have right now, for instance, the leader of the opposition, Rahul Gandhi, who's egging on Prime Minister Modi to give a forceful response to Hasadiki.
Well, I mean, the situation on both sides seems to be very tense, but I think in the coming days we might see some kind of limited action from the Indian side. But the last time when this happened, the surgical strike happened in 2016, and then the 2019 Balakot bombing that happened over a madrasa, they said. You know, the narrative on the Pakistani side was that it didn't even happen. They were like, this is a false flag operation. This is the propaganda. So, I mean, we also have to understand how I think right now Pakistan and India both are sort of being held hostage to their local sort of, media, local sort of pressure, and also the population that, both sides have been radicalizing against each other. And I think this all comes from, we have to look back in the history, and I look at this conflict in the possibility of the fault lines that the South Asian region has. There are lots of these fault lines, whether it's Kashmir, whether it's Balochistan, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, other parts of, and these fault lines, have a lot of discontent, and there's a mismanagement from the federation. And then these fault lines get exploited by different actors, by different stakeholders. And I think what we need to see as, we've seen that, with this in Kashmir, also the revocation, we have to look at it in that point of view about how can we mainstream these regions which feel that they do not have the same kind of, importance from the federation, the same kind of, legitimacy. So I think the both sides need to come together and think about how we'll move forward from this sort of post-decolonial mess that is South Asia today.
Yeah, Anuradha Bhasin, Hasadiki, they're employing the word post-colonial mess. In 1947, at partition, the people of Kashmir, well, they felt awkward, even though it's a Muslim-majority region, for being part of either India or Pakistan. What could have been done differently? What can be done differently going forward?
I think a lot. I do agree with Taha Siddiqui, what he said, that we need to address the discontent at the ground in all these regions. Because even if we're talking about a lot of people saying that there would be no war right now, there would be a low-key hostility. But even low-key hostility, having lived in Jammu and Kashmir all my life, these hostilities are played on the body of the people. They are the ones who suffer. You just show images of, the divided families. Pakistani citizens being forced to leave. There was one 80-year-old man who died on the border yesterday, crossing over. And these are the kind of human tragedy that happen. Cost of the economic cost of. I don't think India and Pakistan can afford it as countries. We have many other issues. We should be cooperating. We should be cooperating and help build a stronger South Asian region.
Yeah, and there is one area where, despite wars, they have been cooperating since 1960. They call the Himalayas Asia's water tower. A treaty brokered in 1960 by the World Bank metes out the use of the rivers that flow from on high towards the sea, the largest, the Indus River. The water management involves India, Pakistan. It even involves nearby China, who also has disputed borders in the area. One of the first moves after the attack of that tourist bus, Chetig Bajpai, was India for the first time suspending that water use treaty. It's a temporary suspension, perhaps, but it's a first nonetheless. Why are they doing it now and they haven't done it at other times when there were actual wars?
Well, I think the Modi government's approach towards dealing with Pakistan has changed. We've clearly see that with the actions it took in 2016, the so-called surgical strikes, in 2019 with the airstrikes, and this time around, it's of course decided to suspend the Indus Water Treaty. So I think it is definitely a game changer of sorts. This is an agreement, as you said, has withstood previous conflicts between both countries. In 1965, 1971, and 1999, although I would add that the treaty was already under a degree of strain. There had been several legal challenges that Pakistan had made against India for its actions. And of course, Pakistan is heavily dependent on the Indus and its tributaries for its economy, its agriculture, its power sector, its cities. I would add a caveat to this, and that is, the treaty is held in abeyance. It's not been abrogated, so it's a temporary suspension, and there's no immediate impact from India's action. It won't be able to immediately redirect water flows, for instance, or terminate the flow of waters. But I think, yeah, I mean, it does have an impact in terms of India can stop sharing water flow data. It can ignore legal challenges that are made against it for its actions. And then over the longer term, yeah, it could potentially construct storage facilities or divert river waters. But as we've heard from the Pakistani side, that they would consider any attempt to do so in violation of the treaty to be an act of war. So I think it is clearly an escalation of sorts between both countries.
Siddiqui, you were mentioning to us before we went on air that it's monsoon season right now.
I mean, it's coming up, yeah, and I think that's the whole point. There's this thought that perhaps because of the suspension of this treaty, suddenly Pakistan would not have water. But I think it's more symbolic right now. It's stating that we are willing to go to this level where we do not want anything to do with Pakistan, and this hard positioning. I think we'll have to see how India comes back from it, because once you take such a position. How do you neutralize it? And will you build infrastructures? Will you? And also, I mean, given the fact that how the climate change has been happening in the last few years or the last decade, we've seen these rivers have been overflowed. There've been flash floods happening.
Yeah, it's been boom and bust.
Yes. So I mean, saying that we're going to suspend the water treaty and take Pakistan's water away, I do not think infrastructurally or in reality it's possible.
Jean-Luc Racine.
Yeah, we have to remember that for years now, the Indian side has asked for revising the Indus Water Treaty. But of course, according to the treaty, it cannot be unilaterally. And Pakistan has always objected to any type of revision. Why revision? Because if we see the map, which has been showed briefly, there is the Indus, which is basically not under Indian control, but there is the subsidiaries. And here, India has built up new dams on the river which are on its side. And for Pakistan, it's extremely serious because, as one expert,
maybe we can call up that map again, just to show.
Some Pakistani expert has underlined, and I think it's important to remind it, that even if the water is not shut down, the uncertainty about what could be Indian policy for the downstream peasants is very serious, because you don't know exactly if you may decide to cultivate this or that, and if there would be some sort of agreement about, we can go or we cannot go in this kind of cultivation. So that's why.
And do you agree with Taha that perhaps Narendra Modi has talked himself into a corner here, something that he can't back down from?
Well, it's very difficult to assess what is in its mind, because, he's not exactly Donald Trump. He may not change his mind today after making some sort of sharp decision. But certainly it's a signal, because as it was underlined before, it's the first time that this issue is coming back. But it's not a total surprise, considering that India, and particularly, of course, after the abolition of the last autonomy, is very keen to develop irrigation and hydroelectricity in Kashmir. But as a number of Indian observers say, this is something which will take years.
Anuradha Bhasin, how do you explain this suspension of the 1960 Water Treaty, which may seem arcane to some of our viewers, but as was stated by some of our other panelists, is essential, particularly for Pakistan?
I think it's more of a political messaging, because right now India doesn't have the kind of infrastructure to stop or control the water flows. So it seems more like a political messaging.
So if it's just political messaging, and we're waiting right now, as was said by Pakistan's information minister in that clip we played at the beginning, for the other shoe to drop from Delhi, what kind of response are you expecting from India?
Well, it's difficult to say. The Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is unpredictable. He is also inspired by a Hindu right-wing ideology, a group that is 100 years old, would be completing 100 years this year, its parent organization. And, the kind of actions that he's taking, very belligerent at one level, at the other turning a blind eye to the kind of hate rhetoric that is being spread within the country, turning Hindus against Muslims, targeting of Muslims, particularly Kashmiri Muslims, various parts of the country. These show that, there is an attempt to meet the tragedy rather than find a solution, or rather than address the issue of justice.
Chetik Bajpai, let me ask you, because Narendra Modi's on Narendra Modi's watch with his hardline Home Secretary, there's been plenty to say about the way the Muslim minority in India has been handled, but at the same time, he hasn't been necessarily belligerent when it comes to Pakistan. We all remember his first inauguration as Prime Minister, where he invited Nawaz Sharif, the then Prime Minister of Pakistan. So what's the general mood these days when India looks at Pakistan?
Yeah, I think you raise a very important point. It's important to remember when Narendra Modi assumed power in 2014, they had actually extended an olive branch to Pakistan. They had invited Nawaz Sharif to his inauguration in 2014. In 2015, Modi had actually visited Pakistan on Nawaz Sharif's birthday. And even if we look as recently as the last few days, we saw Prime Minister Modi make a speech in Bihar, in which he had very forcefully stated that they will identify, track down, and punish every terrorist and their backers. But there was no mention of a Hindu-Muslim angle to the terrorist incident that took place. So I think, if anything, I think on India has essentially tried to dehyphenate its relationship with Pakistan over the last few years, particularly since the terrorist incidents which took place in 2016 and 2019. India is increasingly it's trying to dehyphenate the relationship and portray itself as a global power. So when you talk about India, you talk about its space program, you talk about its G20 presidency, you talk about its relations with major powers, and they've tried to sort of downgrade the relationship with Pakistan over the last few years.
Siddiqui?
Well, I think the problem here is with Pakistan's insecurity. I look at the way Pakistan has dealt with India and all the conflicts that we've seen from 47, 48, when we saw actually Pakistan going after and occupying Kashmir, and then India, the Kashmir at that time, the leadership then signed an accession to India. All of that. Then we had 65, where Operation Gibraltar happened, which was another secret operation that Pakistan did into Kashmir. 99 Kargil, again, Pakistan did not even claim its soldiers that were left behind there. And then since then, we've seen that Pakistan has gone nuclear. Pakistan's adopted a different approach where they have been supporting this sort of low-intensity conflict and these proxy wars and these proxy elements and militants, basically because I think at the end of the day...
Go ahead.
At the end of the day, it's because Pakistan, the military, it all comes back to, the relevance of the Pakistan military in its country, in Pakistan. And for them, they need India as a threat. They want that threat to be alive so that they can justify their budgets, so they can justify their, overarching presence everywhere. And I think all of this plays into that. And I think Pakistan needs to, and it comes with the disbalance that Pakistan has today with the civilian and the military leadership.
So, Jean-Luc Racine, this equivocation that we've seen a lot of on social media between what's happening in Kashmir and what's happening in Baluchistan, your thoughts?
Yes, well, there is at least a common point, is that in both cases, the terrorists targeted specifically the victims as per their religious or ethnic identity. In Pakistan, it was the Baluch versus the Punjabi.
This is that attack on a train back in March.
Train and, in March. But this being said, what struck me, in fact, is that, of course, it was said before, both the government play also the public opinion, which is managed by social network and TVs. And for instance, when we have seen the Indian Prime Minister with the Chief of Army Staff and the Chief of Navy, the Minister for, in this meeting in his office house, he said, strangely, it will be the military which will decide when and how and a strike will happen. I don't believe it. India.
He calls the shots.
Yeah, he calls the shot. India is not Pakistan. The army is really supposed to be at the order of a civilian power. But for me, it's significant because it's a way to show to the public, because of course the meeting was on TV. You see, the army. We are a strong country, and we shall teach a lesson to the adversaries.
All right. On Wednesday, the U.S. Secretary of State picked up his telephone, Marco Rubio, speaking with both his Indian and his Pakistani counterpart to try to dial things down. Anuradha Bhasin, this Trump administration, which has got a lot on its plate after 101 days, are they the best? Are they the best interlocutors to step in and play the mediator?
In the past, India has never liked to openly accept a mediator role. But in the past, whenever there have been flare-ups between India and Pakistan, the international community, particularly the US, has played a role. Now we see a US transform post-Trump And his initial reactions were a little different from what we see, now, because he talked about, okay, they'll settle their own scores, and of course, he did the history of India-Pakistan to 1,000 years. But it's difficult to know what's on his mind. But the thing is that there has to be some kind of sane international voices to get the two countries, which are nuclear countries, to stop both the powers from destabilizing the region.
Kshitij Bajpai, is it towards the United States that we should turn for someone who can help cooler heads to prevail?
Well, as we heard, in the past, the United States has played a prominent role in de-escalating tensions, particularly following during the Kargil conflict, when the Clinton administration played quite a prominent role. Frankly, I don't think there's much in the way of indications that the U.S. Has the appetite to play any restraining role. Trump made a statement that these two, India and Pakistan, will figure it out in some way or the other. Other countries, Russia, Turkey, China, have also called for de-escalation, but frankly, they lack the credibility as impartial mediators. Iran has offered to mediate. I think the Gulf Arab states, I think that may be a potential watch point. Countries like the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Qatar. The UAE reportedly helped to broker the 2021 ceasefire played a role in the brokering of the ceasefire along the line of control in 2021 between India and Pakistan. And of course, Qatar and Saudi Arabia have demonstrated their credentials as mediators in Ukraine and the Gaza conflict. So I think, we should potentially be looking beyond the usual suspects in terms of countries that could play a potential mediating role.
Taha Siddiqui, you've oftentimes been to Kashmir on assignment. What's changed since then?
Well, I think, we have to remember that when we talk about Kashmir, there's the Indian side of the Kashmir, and then there's the Pakistani side of the Kashmir. And I've been to the Pakistani side of the Kashmir, and as we were mentioning earlier about, the oppression or the revocation of the Article 370, etc. On the Pakistani side also, there has been a lot of human rights abuse. There's a lot of suppression of information. The Pakistani side of Kashmir is called Azad Kashmir in Urdu. Azad means independent, but it's just in name, because the Pakistani Prime Minister controls the government there, the military is controlled there, the police is controlled there, the judiciary is controlled there. And I think, not just in Kashmir, but then there's also the Gilgit-Baltistan region, which is also part of Kashmir, which has also been, does not have constitutional rights, does not have its own autonomy. This region is rife with conflict on ground, and we're seeing that Pakistan is nowhere closer to resolving it, and instead Pakistan relies on these militant groups like Lashkar-e-Taiba, like Jaish-e-Mohammed. We've seen them several times morphing into other groups and always lurking in the background where Pakistan can use them. And I think we're going to see a further of that sort of radicalization coming out of all of this, and we've already seen that on social media. We've seen that coming out on the media, mainstream media, that this hardening of position and hardening of this Islamist ideology again happening on the Pakistani side and the Kashmir side.
We're out of time, Jean-Luc Qasim, but does it have to end badly?
I'm pretty pessimistic, not necessarily on what will happen tomorrow or day after tomorrow, but on the long term. This is now more than 70 years that the Kashmir issue is on the table. And still in 2022, there were quite an exchange between India and Pakistan, or in the respective media and observer and think tanks saying, it would be fine to have a more standardized, normal relation. It never works for a lot of reasons. But it never works, and the Pakistani position saying the fate of Kashmir must be decided as per the UN resolution of the 1940s and 50s In fact, it was under Chapter 6 of the UN, which means that it just...
it's a long time ago. Everything needs to be reworked today.
So I'm not very optimistic for solving the issue.
All right, Jean-Luc Racine, I want to thank you so much. I want to thank Taha Siddiqui. I want to thank Aniruddha Basin for being with us from Houston, Kshitij Bajpai in London. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate.